Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Burgundy Zone. I am your host, Kyle. I am joined by my co-host, Goody. Hopefully, Hall will be tuning in with us a little bit later. He had some things to do today. The title of tonight's episode is Beaten, Battered, and Bruised. And speaking to Washington getting destroyed 31 to 0, even though it was 14 to 0 to begin that game, it definitely felt like it was out of reach by that point. And be able to discuss that is good friend of the show, Mr. Ryan Fowler. Thank you for joining us on this very depressing day. How are you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing well, Kyle. Always appreciate having me on, man. And yeah, ugly day for sure, but as it usually is around these parts, it's hopefully time to focus on at least the holidays and the good vibes that follow that and mock draft season here very soon.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And look, the first thing I had to ask you is what went wrong yesterday? Like if you could point to anything where it was like a snowball, or you're gonna say along the lines of it really from the get-go it was terrible. What went wrong?
I think that's a great question, Kyle. I wish I could put, my hand on one thing to say, look, this is where it did go wrong. This is why you lost that football game to a quarterback that hasn't been able to complete a pass consecutively down 15 yards downfield, or completed 16 passes and two of them went to Justin Jefferson, or the defensive lapses on the edges again, or what they're doing in the middle. But I think overall for me, it just really starts with effort. And I see a lot of players in the burgundy and gold right now, and it reminds me of the Albert Haynesworth days,
Mm.
the OJ Atogwe days, when you're trying to sign everybody and anybody. And a lot of guys are stealing paychecks right now, in my opinion. And I think if you're Adam Peters, you got to hold guys accountable. And if Adam isn't holding himself accountable and the guys below him, as in Dan Quinn and that coaching staff, then Josh Harris has got to hold these people accountable, because this is the first time where it's all been peaches and cream. Looking back to last year, where your first year as an owner, and you make an NFC title game and this and that, and Jaden's great and he masks all the inefficiencies. But right now, for me, I'm trying to find who wants to play and who doesn't want to play for me in 26 and moving forward, whether you're a young guy or whether you're a veteran guy.
And if there was any, not I don't want maybe players individually, but where would you say that effort is lacking at on the field?
Yeah, I think specifically it's defensively. I
Okay.
consistently always try to keep my eyes on the new players in the building, as in the guys that were drafted here. And if I'm looking at Johnny Newton, and I'm looking at Ben Sinnott, and I'm looking at Mike Sandersill, those three guys specifically, it's just not enough right now. And really, guys, I think offensively yesterday was completely embarrassing, because if you sat down in August and we talked about what this offensive structure was going to look like, a lot of the names that were out there yesterday is what we would have talked about back in August. And they didn't put up a single point. The pressure package, as far as how they respected that, and as far as how they executed, if you want to say that, was not there. The ground game, you get to the goal line, and your first play call is to basically put a pop pass to Brandon Coleman, his only snap of the football game. There's a lot of questions for everything, and I think we could sit here for 5, 6 hours and talk about everything. But overall, it's just lapses on offense, it's on defense, it's talent, it's scheme, it's coaching. It's all encompassing right now. And it's a damn shame.
Yeah, I will give them like they started out that first and goal with that
Yeah.
run to C-Rod, but then to your point, it was three straight runs
Yep.
after straight passes after that. And I agree with you, just a little bit too cute down there. The running game is what helped you out. Continue to try to force it, and that's like as much as we want to give crap about the tush push. This is exactly why they do that in that situation to help them just get that 6 points when you truly need it to. Goody, I'll go to you after my next question though. Ryan, what did we learn from the loss yesterday? You can't let every loss just go under the wayside. You got to learn from it. So, what would you say we learned?
Yeah, I agree 100%, right? Everyone wants to say just throw the tape away and throw the film away and burn it. No,
Right.
you can't. You got to try to learn from it at some points. I think what you learned yesterday, I think there was well, one thing is Laramie Tunsil at left tackle is as good as Trent Williams was when he was here. Laramie has been absolutely fantastic every single snap that he's been on the football field. I think also in the middle of this defense, every single time I see Jordan McGee, he's playing ball. Everything's not perfect, but he's playing ball. I saw a little bit specifically in the run fits from Quan Martin. Thought he played a little bit better in that area downhill at the second level. And I think also offensively, happy for Ben Sinnott in that first quarter to get a catch. We haven't seen it in a long time. It's one catch. I'm reaching for positives here, but that was a positive for me. So a few guys overall in a game that was really another 3 hours where you completely wasted, in my opinion. And it's a shame because of what you were last year And now where you are, where there's no real clear answer and there's no real clear guy in this draft where you draft him in the top five and say, man, this guy fixes everything and only had 6 picks. There's just so many questions, and I don't know what the short term or what the long term looks like for this franchise, guys.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate we lost Zach Ertz.
Yeah.
That was a disgusting injury that we saw. But we got to see a little bit more of Ben Sinnott. And that flag on John Bates, man, absolutely kills me, even though they were able to convert it and get downfield. He had his hands inside the shoulders, and the defensive end just falls backwards. It gets called for holding on the play, which is crazy to me because what I've been taught is as long as you have your hands on the inside of their shoulder pads, on those chest pads, it doesn't matter what the defensive player has to get their hands off of you. They can't just fall down and then it's a holding call. Just that was disgusting in its own right to me personally.
And
Sorry,
even
Goody.
yeah, and even comes back to where they still call the trap techniques from offensive linemen, where they cut their hands down. They always say that's a hold too. It's not a
Yeah,
hold; it's a trap technique. Every single you're taught that at 10 years old as an offensive lineman, and they call it the highest level of the game. But that's beyond me.
you're right. Sorry, Goody.
No, you're good. So yeah, so based off of last year's obvious, success that we had and emergence as a team with the new kind of overlook of everything, and you have this year's kind of woes. At what point is the conversation kind of accepted to moving on from your head coach? Whereas you got a good sample size last year, you have a terrible example this year. When does that conversation start to be accepted to have? Considering it would be a little sensitive this go around.
Yeah.
Considering Washington's past, where everybody's basically got pitchforks and stakes of fire for saying burn the coach, fire, and bring somebody else in here quickly. But this one be a little bit more sensitive, I feel like, just because of the overhaul of the ownership down to GM, everything involved, and the success that we had last year with our new quarterback. So, when does that conversation start, and when is it okay to have that conversation?
It's like the
Yeah, it's a
Salem
great
witch
question.
trials.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I right now I think it's definitely premature. You have obviously the injuries and stuff like that absolutely have to come into it. I know a lot of people out there don't want to think that injuries matter. Well, they do. They absolutely do. Now you're a defensive-minded head coach and your defense is completely inept. That's something that he's got to answer for sure, because you're getting some of your guys back. Mainly, Duran comes back after the Madrid game. Will Harris has been back there last few games. Mike Sanders still's out there. You brought in Jonathan Jones as a free agent that you liked. No Igbenogany's guy you brought back from last year. I know Marshawn's not out there, but he wasn't good anyway. He was more of a strategically placed road cone for 2 years. Trey Amos, first year guy, I liked him, but he's not out there. I think if we move into next year and you work into week 5, week 6, and this defense has not shown any progression specifically. Because, guys, we sat here last year heading into the NFC title game where we said, look, this team has got to stop Saquon. Everybody and their mother knew that he was going to run the ball, and he scored in his first 2 touches. That was a major concern, right? And we really showed our backside in that ball game. And then that was really a preview, unfortunately. We didn't know it at the time, but it's been a preview of what it's been now in 2025. So if you move into the first month of the season next year and you're not showing any sort of progression defensively. I'm not asking them to shut out teams or allow less than 15 every single game, but some progression as a pass rush, some progression on third downs, the ability to limit chunk plays at any capability, have athletes at the second level that you drafted play them on the football field for more than 20 snaps. I mean, I know I'm going a little bit off the rails here, guys, but Bobby Wagner played 100% of the snaps yesterday, and Jordan McGee played 29 total, less snaps than him. Kane Madrano didn't get a single snap. Neither did Percy Butler, neither did Tyler Owens. Those are young offensive pieces. And that's Dan Quinn as a defensive minded head coach, not playing those guys. They deserve an opportunity. So I think there's questions right now about this coaching staff that's absolutely should be answered. It's not the case where you just say, hey, fire everybody, but they have to hold each other accountable. Dan's going to hold himself and the coaches accountable. And if he doesn't, then we're going to start asking questions middle portions of next year, specifically if this defense does not improve, because this is one of the worst defenses I've ever seen. And I was born in 96. It's been terrible.
Oh, it was historically bad
Yeah.
yesterday. That
Yeah.
allowed the longest drive by far in Minnesota history, dating back to I think 2000. It was so that was a horrible performance. But the big question that everyone kind of was discussing, and look, I've had my own arguments with fellow coaches, if not coworkers, about Jaden Daniels, and everyone believes, well, you should have sat Jaden Daniels, and that's not what you should have done. He shouldn't have been out there, but in my personal opinion, you can't go out and do this with kid gloves. you got to find out the truth about a player, right? And that's where playing goes into it. If you try to protect him now, then what are you going to do next season? Are you going to try to protect him again if this happens again next season? What about the season after that? And that's where this rabbit hole is a very ugly one, in my personal opinion. What did you think of Jaden playing? Should he be shut down from here on out, and should he have been playing yesterday?
I'm glad he played yesterday, and this is the nature of the position. It's the nature of the sport. And I don't want to come back to the conversations that we had pre-draft in 24, where Kyle and I know you even asked me during that year, "Hey Ryan, what are your quarterback rankings?" And I had Caleb one, I had Drake two, and I had Jaden three, and obviously gave my answers. And one of those things I talked about was the longevity with his body type. Some of the guys just have a little bit more bulk to them as well when they want to create outside of structure. And that does matter. And you even look across the league now with some of these younger playmakers. You look at Bo Nix, or you look at Jalen Hurts, or you look at even a Jackson Dart in New York. They got a little more bulk to them. And yesterday, was it just kind of oh, I got a little boo boo on my elbow or something? He got blocked by Isaiah Rodgers. But should he be out there? Yeah, 100%. But I'm right there with you because if you now shut him down, now do you have a major concern? Because you're going to have that same concern working into week one of
Thank you.
2026. That's not going to go away. And at the end of the day, the communication for with him and Noah Brown and Terry McLaurin, I mean, you lose Zach Ertz. I think that's maybe another reason you want to hold him back, but that's never going to change. And right now, guys, I'm becoming extremely worried about his longevity because he can't make it through a football game at this point without getting hurt. And he just got blocked and he falls down on it and he's out of the ball game. So that's a major, major concern. I don't think anybody in their right mind would say that Jaden's not the guy. He's absolutely the guy. I think they're going to add some more pieces on the outside. But overall, yesterday you had your guys. That's the guys you want to go to war with on the offensive side of the football, headlined by number five under center. You didn't score a single point, and you really didn't get much help from anybody on the offensive side of the ball, including Jaden, who really wasn't that good. So I'm in support of playing him. He needs to play. It's football. He's a football player. This isn't a situation like RG3 15 years ago, and I'm tired of talking about him as far as protecting
Thank
the
you.
player. Let him play ball. Let him play.
You're absolutely right. That got I can't tell you how many times that got brought up to me today,
Yeah.
and yesterday in regards to what's going on with Jaden, because they are two different players, and like I tried to explain to them, RG3 couldn't read a field without his legs; he was dead
Right.
in the water, and Jaden is a completely different animal. So their circumstances are not the same. And look, I fully believe in Jaden. That's why he should be playing. Joe Burrow's playing. Ben Roethlisberger played on a broken leg, and you could talk about playoffs all you want. But this is what players do. They play on these sort of things. I mean, my goodness, Daniel Jones is on a broken fibula, and they had playoffs all wrapped up. But sorry, Goody, you do have another question for Ryan.
Yeah, so basically, considering where we are this season, we're eliminated. We're looking into the future. Obviously, a lot of holes to fill with free agency. A lot of our players are leaving in free agency or their own short-term deals. Which direction are you going based off of this team in the draft or free agency? What are your kind of key points to address?
Can I say everything? For
With
quarterback
That
more
and left
works.
detail.
tackle?
With more
That
detail.
works.
Well, guys, I think it starts with identifying who your blue chip talents are. And you got three, in my opinion. That's Jaden, Terry, and Laramie Tunsil. I think you only have three. And there are a lot of teams in football that have upwards of seven or eight or nine. I think you look to Philadelphia and you could probably answer that very quickly. I think overall in this draft, whether you're at five, whether you're at two, whether you're at nine or 10, I still think you're potentially going to be in a position to add picks and trade back. I don't think if you stay at five and say, man, we really want Arvell Reese, or man, we really, really want Caleb Downs. Because I think if there's one guy in this class, guys, that can really impact all three levels defensively in the ground game, stymieing guys high or stymieing the seam, it's going to be Caleb Downs. I love Arvell Reese, but I think it is
Hmm.
Caleb Downs if you want to stay there and grab one player. But I think in free agency, whether it's a Boye Mafe from Seattle or a couple other players, David Onyemata as a veteran addition, I don't know. You got to get healthy and see what you really have. They still like the guys that they brought in this year, but it's really defensively on all three levels. You got to get quicker. You got to get faster. You got to be able to tackle in the open field. You got to get ball players. I mean, look at that Houston defense last night against Patrick Mahomes. They have ball players everywhere. A really good mix of young and just veteran players that just know what they want to do on defense at all three levels. So the focus for me starts on defense before I ever look on offense, where I do think you need another wideout. I do think you need another tight end, and potentially you do need another running back. but you got to get better on defense because this is the exact same spot we sat in last year talking about this defense needs more talent. It just absolutely does.
It's really intriguing for you to say that because like that's what I've said about the edge position where if you could get a blue chip impact guy at the edge position based being in the top 10, there's a lot of I think Dane Brugler put out that he has at least a couple edge guys like Ruber Bain is out there as well. But like I've always said, like if you get somebody like that, that can really bleed into the linebackers, can bleed into the secondary to help you out overall defensively. And it's very intriguing that you say that Caleb Downs could kind of do that. Can you elaborate a little bit more as to why Caleb would affect all three levels?
Yeah, he just does everything so well. He does everything so well. And I think one thing when you look at draft players as far as classifying them as elite talents, it's so easy when everyone says, oh, this guy's a generational talent. People want to say that every year. No, that's not what we're saying here. But I think you draft Caleb Downs in this defense, whatever you do at edge, whatever you do on the outside, his ability to play the low robber spot, his ability to eliminate tight ends over the middle of the field, his ability to run outside the numbers and seal the edge in the ground game if you have to, if you want to play another guy at free safety, his ability to flip and run over the top, to really be that eye in the backfield if you want to, just to look up to my corner here, talk to my linebackers. He's everywhere. When you watch him at Bama, when you watch him at Ohio State, and there's a lot of talent there, and I understand that, but just individualized, I think he can do a lot of things at a lot of different levels. To where, as you just mentioned with Ruben Bain, or you're going to hear the David Baileys of the world from Texas Tech. If you guys haven't checked him out, he is going to be probably my number one edge rusher in this class. It's
Hmm.
not going to be Ruben Bain, it is going to be David Bailey, but he's just going to be able to affect everything at all three levels of this defense. And that's just where I am with Caleb right now, as a flat out really good football player that will hopefully, if Dan Quinn is the DC next year, we'll see, fit what you want to do from a scheme perspective right now.
I got you. Now to wrap this up, Ryan, only a couple more questions for you, brother. I'll try to bleed this out as much as I can. But in regards to the Salem witch trials that we kind of brought up, you brought up already with the fan base want to let everybody go. With the defense, what do you think transpires there from the play caller perspective? You know, Joe Witt obviously had been taken down from his duties, but he wasn't obviously let go ultimately. And I do think that he does stay on in some capacity. Do you think that are you putting your eggs in the basket that Dan Quinn's going to continue calling the defense, or do you think that's and who would you go with the outside source to help?
Yeah, it makes it even tougher, guys, because if you bring someone from the outside in, you're potentially changing scheme, yes, and
Right.
you're also that means changing personnel if you run it correctly, right? You got to match your personnel to your scheme and vice versa. It has to all align, So I think right now, I think really my number one target would probably be an old friend of Dan Quinn's. I know probably people don't want to hear that, but I've always loved Al Harris and what he did in Dallas with those corners, and now he's in Chicago doing that and what he has done with Tyreek Stevenson and when Kyler Gordon's healthy and Jaquan Brisker and Nashawn Wright, who was in Dallas with Dan Quinn and was completely unplayable. He's had a really good career so far.
Hmm.
So I think Al Harris is probably a guy that I would look to as well. Then there's probably some other couple names. Maybe they want to bring one up from college. I don't know. We'll see. If Dan Quinn, of course, goes into next year and he's not the DC, because I just don't see that happening right now, guys. Or is it an internal promotion? Is it Daryl Tapp? Who is it? Who is it in this coaching staff that you could say could really make the calls next year for this defense? But again, I think the number one thing and what goes overlooked always when we talk about changes defensively or offensively is matching personnel to scheme. Everything has to align. It's always about situation and correlating effects. And if you can match personnel and hit on certain players to fit what you want to do on either side of the ball, you're gonna put yourself in a position not to win every ball game, but to at least, and what we're asking right now is to just compete week to week.
I'm with you there. Now, the next question I have for you. Washington has about 20 odd players up for a contract. That's not including guys like Marshawn Lattimore. I think Deron Payne is another guy who could possibly leave. So, with that being said, who should be brought back? Because with Marshawn, that cap number letting him go, it's a juicy one to do to add more money in towards free agency. But at some point, you only have six draft picks. And I know that we want to trade back, but it typically takes two to tango.
Right.
And it'd be hard to come by if somebody has enough to be able to do that. But where do you see some players returning that have deserve to do?
Yeah. First one on my mind is Chris Paul. I think he absolutely deserves to be back. I think you could make a case that he's been Washington's second best lineman this year behind Laramie Tunsil. Now, I think there's been some good from all the other guys as well. And I know the spotlight's been on Big Josh at right tackle all year long. And, depends on who you talk to as far as the opinion there with Josh Connerly. But overall, I think Chris Paul deserves to be back. I love seeing stories like that for him as a guy from a prior regime, right, with Ron Rivera and a day three pick that's really stepped up. Jacob Martin. He's not perfect, and he was brought in to be that or fill that Dante Fowler role.
Hmm.
And I thought he's done a fine job this year. Not perfect by any means, but you had moments yesterday, guys, where you had Sheldon Day, DeMarcus Walker, Johnny Newton, and Von Miller as your front four, and you're dropping seven. That's embarrassing at any level of football. Like there's some varsity schools you could line them up against St. Francis, and that front four is probably not getting home. Like it's pretty much a joke. So I think Chris Paul, Jacob Martin, I know Chris Rodriguez is an RFA. I would like to see him back. And from there, you could cut Marshawn. You could also save 17 plus million by cutting Deron Payne. I think that has to be on the table. You got to make changes. This defense has absolutely horrid from the top to the bottom, bottom to top, everywhere. There's not a single guy I can look at and say, man, you've been awesome this year. So everything should be on the table as far as this defense specifically. If there's one guy I want back to answer your question, Kyle, it should be Jacob Martin along the edge. I thought he's done a fine job.
He has done a phenomenal job. And to your point, a lot of the injuries that happened defensively didn't happen until the middle to later half of the year.
Yeah.
And they were on a historical downtrend ever since week two against Green Bay, which really highlighted a lot of the issues for Washington. Luckily, they played the Raiders in week three, so we were kind of dispelling that, you could say. But the next question that I do have for you, like, with the turnovers yesterday, because I've been making this argument with people, they're saying, well, we need a wide, you can't rule out wide receiver in the first round because we scored zero yesterday. But my point on ultimately being is, yeah, but that was due to turnovers, and it's like those are the quarterback's fault. Like this isn't the offense hasn't really been the issue this season. So like, where do you ultimately lie on that? Are you just going best player available in the draft, Ryan, or do you think? I know you kind of said that you lean towards defense, but the question needs to be asked if you're approached in the top 10 and you have two very blue chip guys at offense and defense, which way would you go?
Yeah, I'll say this, Kyle, and this comes down to the question that we all posed as far as Commander folks years ago when Bijan Robinson was coming out of Texas. And I remember getting the question like, "Hey, if he's at 16, do you take Bijan Robinson?" A lot of folks said no, a lot of folks said yes. Bottom line is that you don't get mad at adding an elite talent at whatever position
Fair.
your organization believes that that guy can contribute. And I'll be honest with you right now, Kyle. If I'm sitting at four, let's just say we end at four, and you're able to trade back, a team wants to come up to maybe get a Fernando Mendoza or a Ty Simpson, whatever, if he even declares, we'll see what happens. But you move back to 9, 10, 11, we'll see what happens. Let's just say Adam Peters and company fall in love with Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame. That's a guy that's a top three player on my board. And
Hmm.
for him in this offense, if you want to take pressure off of Jaden Daniels to turn it around 20 times a game with this front five that's done a pretty good job in the ground game for the most part, even though this scheme, as far as what they're doing in pistol, has been extremely predictive, I wouldn't be out of drafting a guy like Jeremiah Love, but I don't think that's the route they go because they have other holes there. But to your question, if I'm sitting there and Jordan Tyson's there and Carnell Tate is there, Arizona State, Ohio State, for those unfamiliar, Arvell Reese, Ruben Bain, David Bailey, for me, Caleb Downs, just my focus is on the defensive side of the ball because you've consistently tried to add and get pieces there for now what seems like 2 years. So that's kind of where I'm at with things. A lot to get into it, a lot to talk about with these prospects, but that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, in their first two seasons, obviously Washington went offense in the first round, defense in the second round, and obviously getting Trey Amos last year, Mikey Samuel the year before. So my last question to you regarding like I know he kind of asked you about free agency in the draft, but let's say just based on your knowledge of who's coming out in the draft as far as we know at the current moment, what positions would you target in free agency rather than going through the draft? Like what in the draft, what is heavy in talent and production?
Yeah, a great thing for the Commanders this year is that it's a heck of a linebacker class, and I
Hmm,
still think they need some guys there. Because if do you want to move Frankie down as a full-time hybrid edge, play that Nick Bonito spinner role
they
that was
should.
in Denver, right? I agree with you. But
I
Bobby
do. I
Wagner,
watched the tape a little bit, dude. In pass coverage, it's
yeah.
if I had hair, it'd be falling out.
Right. I agree. So you need some guys probably in free agency. I think you added edge because you don't have a second, right? This year. You got a one, you got a three, and then you got a five and two sixes and sevens, whatever it is. But half your picks this year in the sixth and seventh rounds. It's not, it doesn't set up great, right?
Right.
But overall, I think in this class, linebacker is deep. I think receivers deep. You can add some guys working into day two. I think one of the guys that I would really like to see in this offense as a big physical target. Now, I'm not talking Antonio Gandy-Gold and Kelvin Harmon days, and that was a joke. I'm talking a legitimate threat out on the outside, Malachi Fields from Notre Dame. That kid
Hmm.
can absolutely play, and he's been excellent all year long. And it's a shame that we're not going to see him in the CFP with Fighting Irish, but Malachi Fields on day two is absolutely a name to know, as is, if he's there in the second round, Chris Bell, if they were able to work back that far, get another pick, Chris Bell from Louisville, as well as another name note at the receiver position. Running back, if they wanted to add another guy, not a ton of scat back types in this class. Do you like Jamari Taylor from Virginia? Virginia Tech has a kid coming out. Damon Claiborne from Wake Forest. And then I obviously mentioned the headliner, Jeremiah Love. I just think he's a sensational football player. But overall, there's linebackers deep. I think interior offensive line is going to be some players. On the back end, safety, there's going to be some players I like. Earl Little Jr. from Florida State and AJ Halsey from LSU. Those are two names as well to know as you work into the middle rounds as well. But I know as the months to come, Kyle, we'll really get into the weeds of this draft class for sure.
Absolutely. And just real quick, obviously you were on the board of Jaden Higgins early on in the process last season. You kind of pointed me on to him. And obviously he's done pretty well with Houston. Actually a very good job with Houston when they've needed him to. So in your like I know we've talked to Logan in the past and he said that these wide receiver classes are so plentiful and there's so many of them because of the kind of makeup and what's going on through Pee Wee to middle school, high school, and college. These wide receivers are coming in polished and ready to go for the NFL. So with that being said, I know you said the linebacker class is plentiful. How's the wide receiver class looking?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think it's fine, but I will say this really overarching for all of the position groups. Every single year, if you trust your scouting staff, you're going to find players. Because I think we can sit here and say, oh, this class is weak, this class is weak, but we'll sit here a year from now, 3 years from now, and say, man, how did this team or how did the Commanders pass on this guy three or four times? How did he slip to where this spot is now? How did Puka Nakua drop to where he was? If you can find guys that fit, that's really the theme of today's episode here is fit. If you can find guys that fit what you want to do as a ball club, you'll be able to find pieces, whether that's on offense and on defense. I think the receiver class is fine. I really like Makai Lemon. I wish he was an inch taller, and I think he's a top 10 lock. I think he's absolutely, to your point, a polished receiver. He does remind me of Jackson Smith and Jigba coming out of
Hmm.
Ohio State. I think he's a flat out sensational ball player. And if that's the route the Commanders want to go and add a talent on the outside to pair with Terry with a healthy Jaden Daniels under center, excuse me, then that's the route that they go. And you don't get mad at that because that's adding an elite ball player. But overall, this receiver class is just fine. And I think some players are going to rise throughout the draft process. Specifically, one name to watch is Ramilo Brinson from SMU. He's been down there in that offense with Kevin Jennings and company. So he's a player to know. He'll be at the Senior Bowl as well in a few months.
My man. Ryan, I can't thank you enough for your time and joining us. You labeled Terry as a blue chip playmaker on this team, so you're in my good spirits. You're on my good side right now. But before you get out of here, just like to plug your social media handle and your show, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on X if you don't follow me there already, _ Ryan Fowler, and my podcast, Commanding the Huddle. 2 episodes a week is on all podcast platforms.
My man. Have a good night, Ryan. Enjoy this week.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Chris.
Take care,
Appreciate
man.
it.
All right, brother. All right, everybody. We just spoke with the man, Mr. Ryan Fowler. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out in on the chat on Twitter. I am monitoring it. If you do have any questions to ask, but this first one I have submitted on Twitter, I want to ask to you, Goody, and we could kind of get into the game from yesterday. This is from Tony Franchise on Twitter. I haven't felt this low since Callahan was the interim coach. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, it's definitely low. That's across the board. I think everybody feels that same kind of feeling right now because, at first it was really just a lot of wondering, a lot of hope, a lot of faith, a lot of confidence moving forward, and then you kind of just get stabbed in the back, kicked down again and over and over and over. So now we're all at the point where it's just we're all down. After yesterday's game, that was kind of the nail in the coffin, for anything with this season. But where do you go from here? That's kind of what we kind of just discussed with Ryan. Like there's so many questions, right? And where does it start? Who's asking the questions? Is it at the point where Josh Harris is looking around like, what's going on here? We're
Right.
spiraling out. Or is it something where Dan's looking here, Adam's looking at here? What's our personnel looking like? What's our scheme looking like from Dan's point perspective? But where do you go from here? You gotta just, unfortunately, you gotta take it on the chin. You got to take it on the chin. You got to just kind of digest it and, come back and get ready for war and just, load up your guns again and just get back in the battle.
Yeah, look, Chris, Goody, you have kids, so you've seen the movie Ice Age. It's almost like the squirrel with the acorn. Like it's like the acorn is sustainable winning for us this season, and it seems like it's so hard to grab that freaking acorn. And as soon as we're close to it, well, we fall off the side of the the earth or something crazy happens. It seems like it's so
Yeah.
every time you think you're so close to it, it's gone. It's out of your grasp. The South Park episode to boot. Where do we go from here? Obviously the only way to go is up. Unfortunately, it seems like this season, like I know Felix and others have hypothetically brought this up, is like maybe last year was literally just to get the stadium, and but I ultimately believe that with this football team right now, they're not that far away, and it's so unfortunate because after last season we come in very hyped, ready to go. They raised the ticket prices, and obviously a lot of that is due to the stadium, and everyone is pissed off right now, and rightfully so, of course. But the injuries obviously derailed this football team. And to be perfectly honest with you, I know this is not going to be a popular opinion, but Jaden has to do a better job of protecting himself. And as much as we want to coddle him and say he shouldn't be playing, shut him down for the season, that's the right thing to do. I honestly, I get it. I do. But we wouldn't be having these issues if he did a better job. Like in that sort of instance, you got a banged up elbow. There is no reason to be going so hard after that guy. Like I think Jared Goff learned his lesson last season against Washington in the playoffs, and Frankie Luvu popped him in the chin strap. Right? Like maybe I shouldn't be doing that. As much as you want to stop the touchdown, trust your teammates to go make a play like Terry McLaurin did. But ultimately, where do we go from here? You just keep working hard essentially with Washington. You're trying to find answers. But I think this season, I said it before, it really exposed our weaknesses. And last season was a lot more so of our strengths. And we are a very top heavy roster in the sense that last season we didn't have that many injuries. And so our top heaviness wasn't really exposed. This season, very much so, was put on the forefront to say, where do you have besides your top guys? And that's where we kind of lacked at. So I think ultimately, where do we go from here is building from the ground up and from reverse aspect. Now, we have a question submitted later on, and I'm going to kind of get into the draft and what we think from the Colonel. But the honestly, the only thing that we go from here is everyone just continuing to complain, and we're all going to be fighting on Twitter for the next 4 months, 5 months about what we're going to do in the draft at the top 10 and trading back, staying put, taking a wide receiver, or taking a defensive end. And I think free agency is going to be very telling for this football team because you have to make a lot of hard decisions that are not going to make this front office look fantastic. But I think things are needed to be done in order to make this football team as good as possible. And that's the only thing you can do is continue to try to get better. And if there's one good outlook from this season, it's that the offensive line is one of the most best units on this football team. And if you have a young quarterback, that's the way to go. You got to make sure your offensive line is good. And that's what Washington has solidified this season. If there's anything good to take away from this is that the offensive line is set up for success in for the future, and left tackle is obviously number one. Now, the next question was submitted was by the Colonel, and I'll go to you first, Goody. His question is: Rico Street scores in his element plotting our draft strategy for 2026. Given the current scenario, he believes we trade back from the third selection to the 16th in order to get a mid-second rounder. I'm skeptical about this. What do you think?
So it really comes down to what the board's looking like. It's still kind of early in the process right now, but I know we're talking about it because that's where our season is headed. But in terms of like where people are kind of ranked right now, it's hard to say what we would do with that number 3 overall pick. Besides, that point, for me personally, I would be trading back. if you have the third pick overall, you're definitely going to be able to get a good recoup for that. And still being in the first round at a 16, you're not too far back, whereas you're not missing out on the top talent of the draft. So in terms of getting more assets in the draft, so you could kind of utilize that to really identify more holes or address more holes on your roster, I'd be all for trading out of three. Get back to 16, pick up some picks in the second round, third round, even if possible. But again, right now we don't know who's at that third spot. It could be, the premier edge rusher that this defense needs, and it's like there's no way we're moving off of this. Or it could just be, somebody that's not necessarily a need right now, and then you could kind of utilize that, situation to move back and get more.
I don't know, man. I don't like it, Colonel. I know that Colonel is on the board of trading back. And look, I get it because we don't have that many picks. It would be smart to be able to get some more picks. But I do not want to leave the top 10 with only a second rounder attributed to it. I would make the argument that the reason that Washington is in the position it's in today is, of course, their depth, but the lack of impact players. And we heard this at the end of last season going against the Eagles where it was the lack of impact players. That's why they went and got Debo. That's why they went and got Laramie Tunsil to add some more productivity and impact onto this football team. And is it really going to be that big of a bang for your buck? Because at this point, do we really feel confident that they can nail an impact player at 16? Are we confident that they can nail a second rounder to be an impactful, fantastic football player from the get-go? And I don't think so. I think that Jaden Daniels at 2 was monumental for this franchise. And I think that that's the kind of thing you need on the defensive side of the football. So if you are going to trade back, you have to do it within the top 10 so you could still get impact somewhere and you can recoup some other picks if possible. But I am not comfortable with leaving the top 10 with only a second rounder attributed to it. I don't think that's enough bang for your buck. And if you go back to 16, you're really letting go some of the possibilities for some fantastic football players that could help you on day one. I personally do not like it, Colonel. I know others would probably disagree with me, but I think that the third overall, is very high in value, and that's not something that should be shipped out just simply for a second rounder going back to 16. I think that's way too far, in my personal opinion. His next question, Goody said, "Do you agree with Rico that AP mortgaged our team's future by signing these aging veterans instead of free agents, which he had plenty of salary cap for? Are we going to subject Jaden Daniels to a Bryce Young like a couple years before we emerge again?"
No, I don't think he did. I think he was, I mean, realistically, when he came into office, we had a ton of cash. So if anything, instead of coming in and being, and again, this comes down to each GM's kind of operation, right? What they like to do. So in terms of him mortgaging the future with these veteran contracts, I think he was more or less being cautious, and not in a bad way. I think he was just trying to go to the basics and build a football roster, right? There was a lot of turnover from the Rivera era. There was a lot of holes on the team. He had to fill a lot of spots on his first year, with a new head coach and new everything. So in terms of mortgage in the future, now I get that he kind of did that same thing year, back to back. He did that same thing this offseason, to an extent with getting, sort of aging veterans on short-term contracts. But he also did make some additions in terms of addressing the premier position of left tackle, getting another wide receiver in here in Debo. So he was able to kind of take that and still, make a little bit more moves that are going to have more impact versus just filling out the roster with aging veterans. But I don't think he mortgaged the future. I think he actually put us in a position to be able to see what we need and be able to go out and get it when it's there available in the market or in the draft. Now, of course, with the
Fair.
same process of doing that, this season is just looking like a dumpster fire. So anything that you kind of discuss in that topic, it's gonna look bad, it's gonna taste bad, smell bad, just because of the results that we have. But I don't think he mortgaged the future by adding aging veterans to the team. I think he put us in position so that we can afford to fall on our face and be able to get back out the mud.
I know what Street Scores is saying, Colonel, because like bringing back guys like Bobby, bringing back guys like Zach Ertz, where you could have went down another path to add a little bit more youth, a little bit more speed to this football team in other areas. I definitely get what he's getting at. Um, Ultimately, what I'll say is yes, but hindsight is 2020. And you can see why AP brought these guys back. They were huge in the success of what Washington had last season. You can't put a price tag on Bobby Wagner recovering that fumble against Baker Mayfield late in that playoff game. You can't put a price tag on that. That was definitely worth it. And that's what AP kind of went into to say we can improve with Laramie Tunsil, adding the left tackle of the future for this quarterback who's one of the best and most premier in the league. Let's add another playmaker in Debo Samuel to help in the middle of the field and to help with those wide rushing and screens that Cliff likes to run. So ultimately, I'm not going to say mortgage our future, but it did mortgage this season, and specifically due to the lack of depth. And that's where it kind of goes into. Whereas somebody on Twitter said to me today, you can still build through free agency and get talent in the draft at wide receiver. And I'm like, I get that, but that's what we tried to do last season, like in the last offseason, and it blew up in our face big time. And so ultimately, I want to say is you got to get impact players. Was it a mortgage to the future? No, but this season it definitely was. So I'll agree with Street Scores on what he's ultimately saying. And that's what I mean by hard decisions have to be made and they're going to have to be made very, very soon. And it's gonna be hurtful, but ultimately, it's what needs to be done for this football team because there are weaknesses, and you got to get better, and you need some youth in here, man. And give a lot of credit to New England and other teams like that that have done this and being able to generate productivity overall as a team success based on their free agency. But their schedule is easier. Their schedule is like ours was last season. Give them credit where it's due, but ultimately things are going to change this offseason, Colonel, and there's no reason to go back and keep beating them up over it. It's unfortunate. I still go back to the Terry contract negotiation is what really stuck a knife in the back of this organization. I'm not going to stop talking about it, Goody. I'm going to keep
I
bringing
think
it up.
I think we got that. I think we got that.
I said it almost every episode. Now, the next question, this one was submitted in the Discord. Not much to trade for picks. What do you think we'd get for Louvu?
For Luvu, it really comes down to, it takes two to tango. How bad does another team, want him or want what he brings to the game? So it's hard to say what we would get back for Luvu. In terms of,
Mid to late rounder.
yeah, I would say probably like fourth, fifth round, maybe. But I don't think that's worth it for us personally. I think we should
Correct.
utilize him, maximize him instead of, shipping him off for picks that is ultimately just a question mark. Yeah, we saw what Louvu brought to the football team, on the field and off the field last season. Still, brings that energy here. The results across the board for anybody is just not the same as last year, which we all know. But you don't get rid of that. You don't get rid of that just for a draft position. I think he brings a lot more value than just what you see on the field to the team as basically like the glue, He's a part of that brotherhood through and through. So
Yeah, and obviously his energy is unmatched in terms of the locker room celebrations and everything. And like you had kind of said, I don't think that you're really going to get all that much for it. And obviously Washington needs a lot of draft picks, but with Frankie, if Rusher is still such an issue, depending on what you do in the draft and free agency, I think that that's where Frankie could be very impactful for you. Watching the film from yesterday, there was that one third down that went to TJ Hawkinson, if I'm not mistaken. And he comes and Frankie drops back into his zone and he's in the back pocket of TJ Hawkinson. But for some reason, he moves inside towards Bobby Wagner, which allows just a little bit of space for JJ McCarthy to throw that ball into the stomach of TJ Hawkinson to pick up the first down. And it's like that sort of play. It's like he didn't move his body, his face mask didn't move. There was no reason for you to come off of your assignment there and then for that first down to be picked up. And it's like one of those situations, like just why, man? Like what?
overthinking,
Did you
overthinking.
want them to have it? So many crazy thoughts come into play, but it's one of those situations where I want to take Frankie out of that element. I just want Frankie getting after the passer. I think he almost had a sack yesterday. We had four on the day, which is crazy to even think about. But ultimately, I just want him rushing more. And I think that that's where he's at his best, is being utilized in that way. And now
Yeah.
that's just my opinion. I'm an idiot on the couch. I totally get it. What do I know? But ultimately, I don't think that we're going to get as much as we would hope for with Frankie Louvu, based on his contract and everything of the sort. I don't think that a team is willing to offer more than that. But if the draft pick is more valuable in Adam Peters' mind, then it is what it is. Now that Tim Towner asks, please discuss playing or sitting JD5 for the rest of the season.
Oof. So for me personally, I'm still with play the kid. I understand it's just like again, man, this is just so it's just terrible because every time he stepped back on the field after recovering from a previous injury, there was something else that followed. That is so tough to just kind of you know, to face the fact of. But even I guess the one silver lining in my my stance on this is based off of yesterday that he could have come back into the game, right? He said Coach Quinn said that he could have came back into the game and played. It was
He
his
said he
decision
was
to keep him.
pissed.
I believe it. You could see it on his face. He was not happy. And honestly, when you think about this, right? So you got to kind of keep track of all the events of the season. I'm not going to go too far back, but in the game where we're getting blown out by Seattle and he's left in the game for no reason, really, but there really is a reason. Get those reps. He gets the injury. And then coach, everybody's coming at the coach, like, don't you think you should have pulled him? Blah, blah, blah. Dan says, yeah, I was gonna pull him after this drive. He took the heat, he owned up to it. He's a man of, he's a great guy. So to be in this situation again this week, I think Dan was like, let me get in front of this. He obviously is coming back off of his injury. He's injured again. I have a chance right now, without even having to think twice, of taking him out and just preventing anything further. So I think he just adapted to that. But the fact that he said he was able to get back on the field, I'm out there with putting him back for the rest of the season. That's me.
Yeah, in my personal opinion, Tim, you play him. If he's healthy, you play him. And look, he had elbow soreness. There's no doubt about it. That doesn't mean you withhold him because he's sore with his elbow. He's fully healed from the knee injury. Not out there with that brace. The only brace he had on was his elbow. As much as everyone likes to argue with me about that. But this is the discussion that I had with people at work today. This is the discussion I had with fellow coaches yesterday, and that they shouldn't have been out there. You got to protect the investment. And I totally get it. But I still am under the belief if you're not playing Jaden Daniels due to the injury concern, then you are admitting you made the wrong selection at two. And as much as you guys will point the other direction, say that's not true, that's what you're admitting by wanting to not play him because you don't trust him enough to not get hurt. And that is a concern in itself. That is a legitimate issue or a problem that you have. I don't think anybody from Cincinnati is concerned about Joe Burrow playing right now. They want
Nope.
him on the field. They want him playing. And that's the thing, is like you should want your quarterback out there. Jaden Daniels' stat line from yesterday was 9 of 20 for 78 yards and one interception. At what point are you looking at that and saying that is confident building going into next season? If that's
Nope.
something that you can hang your hat on. And that's my point is yesterday was a learning curve for Jaden going against a blitz heavy front. You need him in those taking those bullets so he can learn to get better because there were outlets that were not hit yesterday. There was one second down where I think he threw it to Ben Sinnott on like a hitch or an out, where C-Rod was running a swing to the outside. It was a check down, and the rusher was coming up into Jaden's face, and he threw it in the ground, which was smart in on Jaden's behalf. But swing that out to C-Rod. Let's get positive yardage instead of throwing that into the ground, right? And that's the learning part that you have to get better. As much as we want to sit here and anoint Jaden to say he's the most perfect quarterback that's ever blessed the game of football, there's still an element to it where you still have to refine your craft. Tom Brady was instrumental in saying stuff like this. You have to keep refining, you have to keep working, and availability is the best ability. If you're benching him because of an injury concern, that is a gigantic problem. The kid has to get better. He has to continue sharpening his craft. As much as I believe in Marcus Mariota, and unfortunately his need to continue stretching plays out that ends in turnovers for Washington this season. Yeah, I need Jaden on the field, man. If he's healthy, of course. I don't want to force him out there if he's not ready to go. But that's one of the situations where Jaden has to protect himself. And that's what it comes
Yeah.
down to. You got to
Yeah,
protect yourself better.
it's super important to me that he does right the ship, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to, be shiny and bright. It just needs to be complete and finished. So you could just eventually put a stamp on this season and pack it up and then start to look for improving and getting better. If he's not out there, then there's just so many looming question marks throughout the offseason that I, for one, do not look forward to hearing and seeing on my stream, my timeline. I cannot. It would just be terrible. You'd rather just see him kind of stamp it and finish strong.
Absolutely. And that's what we would all hope. And I know Jaden feels the same way. And that's probably why Jaden was pissed yesterday of having to come out of that game because he wanted to stay in the game. He wanted to finish it out what he started. And my coworkers brought this up because we have one of our coworkers had an injury not too long ago. He fell off a ladder and broke his wrist, his arm. And so he's been chilling, waiting to come back, and he's waiting to make sure that everything is growing back properly, and he's going to come back to work in a light kind of duty. And they were saying that you don't do that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, everyone else is injured on the team. Like same with Little Los. You're not telling Little Los to stay home because of a possibility that he's going to be injured. You want him coming back doing light work, which is what he's doing. And that's what's going on with Jaden. But in the same breath, when he comes back to work here, he's got to be smart with what he's doing with work and light work. You can't be putting yourself in a position where you could make that injury worse. And that's what it comes down to, the personal person being smart in how they're going about their business and not making a situation worse. I love the competitor in Jaden, but when he dove for that first down, that's one of those situations where it's like, I understand you want the first. I love the competitive aspect of you, but is it the smartest thing to do right now? No, it's not. I obviously we want the first down. I wanted the first down. I was happy we got the first down. But just saying overall longevity concerns, that's one of the things right there. Be smarter, my dude. Be smarter. That's where it comes into getting better as a passer, finding your check downs, and you can point blame to the wide receivers all you want and the lack of separation, lack of availability for passes. You still got to be smart with the football and get that ball out of your hands so you don't take those hits, man. Just in my personal opinion. We're going to be talking about this all freaking offseason, Goody. Looking forward to it. Last question we have is from Tim Towner. You have a D-centric head coach, but only the O has been productive in the 2 years they have been here. Do you fire the head coach, make the OC the new head coach, promote internally for a replacement OC, and go outside to get a replacement DC? Ron Rivera showed us that the old dogs can't hunt. We need some young blood. Think the way things stand now, we're picking fourth.
Yeah, the equation there is just that's what makes this whole thing even more kind of hard to really put your finger on, considering Dan Quinn, being a defensive minded head coach, has had defensive success in the league, obviously, and our team's worst, but basically asset is our defense. So when you factor that in, and it's hard to say that yet, based on the offense being better than the defense, when you compare the two, there's not much better you have to be considering how bad the defense has been. So the offense may not even really be worth as much as you think it is comparing it to the defense. So promoting, Kingsbury to head coach, that's something those are waters I wouldn't swim in, or even entertain the idea of. I just don't see that being a feasible at this time. But um, it is kind of, I think you do have to bring somebody else in, on the defensive side. Whether Dan Quinn, which I'm not sure, I don't know him personally, if he has a pride problem or not, but he may have to swallow his pride and get somebody in here. I don't think he'll have a hard time doing that, considering he even went after Kingsbury, considering he couldn't go up and stop his offenses. He always gave him trouble,
And
but
that's
he
why
went
he
out.
went after Kyle Shanahan, he said, because whenever he went against Kyle Shanahan's offense, they really were able to get after his defense, and he wanted to learn more. And obviously, he didn't learn
Exactly.
all that much because Shanahan's offense continues to destroy us. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean that offense is undefeated. But yeah, so even with that, right? So he's the pride isn't all the way there because you could see him just being able to own up to it and wanting to learn. But in both of those examples, those are offensive minded coaches. So I don't know what that looks like as a defensive coach coming in. If there's somebody that he likes, the tendencies or whatever. So that's where it's a little different because those are offense and this is specifically defense. But I think you do have to bring somebody in defense and just change it up.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of it because continuity is king in the NFL. That's how you have sustainable success in this league. We don't want to echo what Dan Snyder was doing, where it's the immediate, if you're not doing anything, I'm going to let you go. And now we have to start from scratch, right? And we necessarily wouldn't be starting from scratch if we kept Cliff Kingsbury in your hypothetical scenario there. But I love the continuity of it. The issue being, is that Dan Quinn's defense needs more uniqueness to it, especially in Minnesota yesterday. They knew exactly what we were in. There was this one third down. I think it was the out route to TJ Hawkinson on Noah Igbenogany, where they know that play is there. So they were coming out in this kind of cover a Tampa 2 sort of way, and then TJ hits the out route right outside of Noah and it's wide open. Like that's the sort of play that should not be easy. Like you need to be unique. You need to be ahead of the curve, so to speak. We continue to be on the receiving end. Like yesterday, there was a third down. I think it was a third or second down. Minnesota comes out showing that they're rushing six, right? They're standing up six on the line of scrimmage. And Jaden, you see him talking pre-snap. He's trying to diagnose what's going on. And that was the wide receiver screen to Debo on the right side, not the one that went and converted the first down. This was one that we threw it to Debo, but what ended up happening was Minnesota dropped back into a zone. And so what ended up happening is it was a no, it was stopped for 2 yards, and then we were dead in the water. Like we need to get ahead of that. Like we need to be smarter than that. It shouldn't be so easy to see what we're in. And Brian Flores kind of showed that yesterday. By dropping back into that, it stopped that wide receiver screen from happening. And on defense, we don't really have that. What you see is what you get. And I know Dan Quinn has been trying to implement an area of this defense where we're much more disguising things so offenses don't know what's going on. But for some reason, these Shanahan coaches know this defense very well. I mean, we can go back to that Dallas playoff game against Green Bay where they just picked them apart. It's typical that these offenses do this to Dan Quinn's defense. And you need a new element. You need something new to be able to stifle it a little bit. And unfortunately, at the moment, do I think that if you promote Cliff that you're going to ultimately get to the where you want to go? I don't think so. You still need the continuity, especially defensively. And I would really like to see Bobby Wagner come back as a coach, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not sure if that's in the cards. I know a lot of time is allocated to that. I'm not sure if Bobby is willing to sacrifice more family time in order to be a coach, but the continuity is king. We just need a little bit more youth impact defensively. And I do think that this team is not far away, Goody. I think that Washington can do something. They just got to get a little bit more impact and make things a little bit more unique. And then I
I'm
think
very I'm
Washington would
very
be enough.
confident that they can get back together. When it's this bad, it's not. I feel like it's an easy fix. I don't want to say an easy fix, but I feel like it's not impossible. When it's this bad, you look around the room, everybody knows it. The elephant is in the room, right? So I feel like this is like the perfect time for this team to just regroup, come back next season, and just be the sleeper. Be the sleeper and just kind of get back on the train, on the groove.
Yeah, like I was talking to my fellow coaches, and they were saying that the NFL has a year of tape on Jaden. They figured Jaden out this season, and I was like, wait a minute, that no, no, no. They had tape on Jaden all of last season, and they couldn't do anything about it, right? This season was not based on Jaden at all. All of the blame goes on the defense. They were historically bad. The offense was not, but they still need to get better. So my point is, it's not that the NFL has figured out Jaden. The NFL has figured out Dan Quinn's defense. And that's where the area of the biggest concern is. Making it more unique, making adjustments, doing things outside the realm of comfortability. Just doing a little bit more aggressive, you could almost say. Take a page out of Brian Flores's book. That's what I loved about Brian Flores' game plan yesterday. The standing up multiple people, yes, it puts you in an uncomfortable stretching kind of situation where your guys are on the line of scrimmage and they drop back into coverage and you're most likely losing depth. But in the same breath, it's confusing. You saw what it did to Jaden and the offensive line even when they were rushing only four, showing that six, the fact that they showed six confused the offensive line enough to allow somebody to get free
To
because they
leak
were
through.
looking. Yes, and
Yeah.
that's what I was trying to say weeks ago, and what Joe Witt needed to do. Let's stand more people up. Let's confuse these offensive lines to help out the back end because they know what we're in. And so, my personal opinion, I think that we just need to mix things up a little bit more. Be more aggressive. As much as we want to talk about anybody, anywhere, anytime, and right now they know exactly what we're doing. And it's not like that. We're getting beaten like Nate Robinson in the boxing ring. And we need to kind of pick ourselves up and start from scratch again this off season. I know Dan Quinn will most likely do that. But just saying it's too predictable. It's too easy to see. And we have seen it all season long where these teams just go right down the field and there's nothing that we can do about it. We're not surprising anybody, and that's what ultimately Washington needs to do. Stand more people up on the line of scrimmage, get those bodies down there, and confuse some offensive lines, and good things will happen. Because sitting at 3rd and 12, 3rd and 8 on that 98-yard drive was terrible. In that second half, I actually vacuumed my house, Goody.
I kid you not, I was doing the same thing. I
Were
was
you?
vacuum. I kid you not, I'm sitting there, I have the game on, and I'm like, this is how bad the season is. I'm vacuuming my dining room with the little Dyson. I was like, this is outrageous. That is hilarious that you said that.
The fact of the how JJ McCarthy and the Vikings offense had been playing and seeing how easy it was for them just to go down the field. Like what Washington has been able to hang their hat on defensively is that they're able to stop up the middle runs. It's much more so the outside runs that have been an issue for them in the passing game. So the fact that ending of this game, the Minnesota rushed for more rushing yards than us, 162. I was distraught. Like, what the hell is going on here? Now, why can we not at least do one thing? One. And usually that's something you can hang your hat on. And it was just seeing JJ McCarthy smile, Kevin O'Connell and them smile, having them bench their wide receivers at the end of that game. I couldn't, I was like, dude, I'm just going to go vacuum. As much
And
as,
if I'm not mistaken, Justin Jefferson had 11 yards.
yeah, Terry had 41. So
And
we were right.
yeah, but how does the final result 31-0 Minnesota, and you look at the stat line and Justin Jefferson has 11 yards? That just goes to show you, like, where do you start with answering what the heck is going on here? Because that's just, it's
It's
comedy.
putrid.
It's comedy.
Well, it starts with 3 for 10 on first downs, starts with being 1 for 3 on fourth downs. It starts with only throwing for 99 yards passing altogether, attributed with the sack numbers of the negative yards there. 0 for 2 in the red zone, where the Vikings were 4 for 4 in the red zone. The turnovers having three altogether, losing the time of possession battle 34-25. That's the keys right there. In Washington, as much as they were doing great things on the ground, they went away from it. And like we've seen all season long, when Washington puts themselves in a hole early, they are at their worst. They cannot be in a typical straight up passing situation the entire game. That's recipe for bad news. We're going to turn over the football. Guys are getting hurt. When Washington is able to have the run game be sustainable and do well, that's when this offense really takes off. And we saw that versus Denver. And we kind of saw it in the first drive, and then everything just went haywire. That pick by Jaden is, I don't want to put too much bad stuff on him for that, but except for him trying to run it down. But ultimately, the turnovers were the big, big difference in this game. And that's the unfortunate part offensively, is everyone's crying about the 0 points. You can't say it's due to a lack of talent. That's too many mistakes made. And that's where
Yeah,
the issue lies. Is that's what you're trying to correct going into next season. And unfortunately, that's the reality that we live in.
yeah, indeed. This team's been flirting with this same girl all season, and she's the one that we were dancing with yesterday. That big zero. So I'm not even too surprised. You know, this team in general just has not been good this year. We were on a term where a few games where we were looking, you know, competitive, but yeah, yesterday was was a dagger. Was a dagger.
Absolutely was. It was so funny when I think it was the second Oliver touchdown. The guy in like the fourth quarter, the guy is like, and there's a proverbial dagger. It's like, dude, that dagger was like 2 quarters ago. You could hear Drew Brees kind of scoff at it.
If only he
Um,
knew. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's like, come on, dude, that wasn't the dagger. The dagger was a while ago. But more credit too, which I thought Drew Brees did a great job calling that
I was
game.
just gonna say that. Yeah, I enjoyed I enjoyed that. That was like the first game I think I've actually watched with Drew Brees at the calling it. That was cool.
Yeah, and I didn't like seeing JJ McCarthy smile that much. He was way too clean during that game. As much as we had 4 sacks on him, he was still able to do whatever the hell he wanted. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap us up for this episode. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in on Twitter. It's the first time doing this. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you haven't caught the episode before, appreciate you guys. We go live obviously on Mondays typically or Tuesdays, and then Fridays or Saturdays. Celebrating my anniversary this Saturday, so I'm not sure exactly what we're going to be doing. Or no,
Congratulations.
not this Saturday, next Saturday. I'm tripping.
Don't get it wrong. You can't get it
Yeah,
wrong.
I know, but I'm no, I'm trying to remember. That's not the actual anniversary, but we're just
Oh,
celebrating.
I got
But
you.
I think for this one, we have a football coaches Christmas party on Saturday is what I'm thinking of. So I hope you guys have a fantastic week. Try not to bludgeon each other too much on Twitter. I know I was riling you guys up this morning with my tweet from yesterday saying, "Yeah, imagine watching this game and saying we need a wide receiver instead of defense." I like to rile you guys up sometimes. I like to rile you up sometimes. But I'm just saying, 98 historical yard drive, and we're sitting here talking about just need players. I understand that, but the defense is a legitimate issue. You know what I'm saying? All right, everybody. We'll see you again next time. We'll see you again on Friday. I'm Kyle,
Goody.
and we'll see you guys then. Washington football.